I have something huge coming up, which is a documentary about P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, P. Diddy.
Yeah.
Did he do it, right?
Yeah.
I know you've been heavy on social media talking about it.
He did it. And I'm the only one who's been vocal about this long before.
50 Cent's role in this conversation is not quiet. He does not speak as a neutral observer. He speaks as someone who believes silence protected too much for too long. According to him, silence in the industry is not passive. It is valuable. It keeps doors open. It protects money, access, and power. He suggests that when silence becomes useful, it stops being accidental. It becomes a choice. In discussions surrounding the documentary, 50 Cent points out that Meek Mill's name appeared in public conversations only after legal pressure increased around Diddy. Before that, few people spoke openly. When they did, it was often brushed aside as jokes or internet talk. This shift in tone is important. It shows how power shapes conversation. When influence is strong, questions stay quiet. When influence weakens, questions get louder. 50 Cent does not frame Meek Mill as a villain. Instead, he frames him as someone who entered a system much larger than himself. A system where access comes with expectations, and success often comes with unspoken rules. Meek Mill's story has always been about struggle. From legal battles to public pressure, his career has been shaped by conflict with authority. The documentary suggests that this made him vulnerable to powerful alliances, not because of weakness, but because survival often requires protection. The idea presented is not that Meek Mill did something wrong, but that closeness to power does not always mean safety. Sometimes it means obligation. Throughout the documentary, attention is given to body language, repeated phrases, and public interactions. None of these prove anything on their own, but together they create discomfort. Discomfort comes not from one clip, but from many. This discomfort is what drives public reaction. Online, people began revisiting old footage. They questioned why certain things were normalized. They asked why behavior that would raise concern elsewhere was ignored in hip-hop culture. These questions did not come from one source. They came from thousands of viewers watching the same material. 50 Cent addresses this by saying that people often ignore signs when success is involved. Fame creates excuses. Money creates patience. Influence creates fear. He also speaks about image. According to him, image is the strongest shield in the industry. Once someone controls how they are seen, they control how they are questioned. This control does not require force. It requires belief. The documentary focuses heavily on patterns instead of claims. It looks at how authority operates quietly, how loyalty is rewarded, how distance is punished. These patterns are not written down, but they are understood by those inside the system. One repeated theme is silence after controversy. When questions arise, responses are delayed or avoided. Statements are carefully worded. Language becomes vague. According to 50 Cent, this is not coincidence, it is strategy. He suggests that when people rush to deny something loudly, it often means panic. But when people say nothing, it often means confidence that the system will protect them. Another point raised is the role of mentorship. Power does not appear overnight. It is passed down. Behaviors are learned. Standards are shaped by those who came before. This does not excuse actions, but it explains how cycles repeat. In the documentary, several voices suggest that Diddy's public image was carefully built over decades, reinvented many times, always polished. But real power, they say, does not show itself openly. It operates behind closed doors. This is why the leaked audio discussed in public conversations had such impact, not because it proved crimes, but because it revealed tone, control, comfort, authority. It showed how someone speaks when they believe no one else is listening. Tone changes perception faster than facts. Once that tone became public, reactions shifted. People who were once neutral became curious. People who were once silent began to distance themselves. Statements became defensive. Legal teams became active. 50 Cent points out that when someone hires others to protect their image aggressively, it raises questions, not legal questions, but personal ones. If someone is sure of themselves, why work so hard to control perception? He compares this to confidence. A confident person does not chase every rumor. They do not fear every whisper. Fear shows itself through action. The documentary also touches on legal strategy. It explains how information can remain sealed for years, how discovery works, how evidence can exist without becoming public. This adds another layer of tension. People begin to wonder what is known and what is not. There is also discussion around property, wealth, and asset seizure. This part creates strong reactions. Some see it as accountability, others see it as overreach. The documentary does not tell viewers what to think. It shows how power is challenged when money is involved. Throughout all of this, Meek Mill remains a complicated figure. He does not speak much. When he does, it is careful. Some see this as avoidance. Others see it as survival. 50 Cent acknowledges this complexity. He says he does not know Meek Mill personally. He says he cannot judge his private choices. What he focuses on instead is perception. Perception shapes legacy. When people see repeated closeness, matching behavior, and silence during pressure, they form opinions. Those opinions may be unfair, but they exist. The documentary also raises the idea that some people enter situations without fully understanding the cost. They chase opportunity, not realizing what will be expected later. By the time they understand, it is too late to walk away clean. This is where power becomes dangerous. It does not trap people immediately. It slowly narrows options. Another major theme is recording and control. The idea that private moments can become leverage. The documentary does not claim proof. It discusses fear. Fear that such material exists is often enough to keep people quiet. Fear does not need confirmation to work. Industry insiders react not with shock, but with recognition. Many say they heard similar stories for years. They say they ignored them because nothing could be proven. The documentary suggests that proof is not the only thing that matters. Patterns matter too. As more voices speak, it becomes clear that this is not about one relationship. It is about how the industry functions. Who gets protected, who gets blamed, who gets erased. 50 Cent states that what he is doing is not revenge. He frames it as correction. He says history cannot be cleaned by silence. It can only be corrected by truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. The documentary does not offer clear answers. It offers pressure. Pressure forces response. Response creates accountability. The final question is not whether rumors are true. The question is why they were ignored for so long, why discomfort was accepted, why silence was rewarded. This story is still unfolding. New information may appear, or it may remain sealed, but the conversation has changed. Once people begin to question power, it never fully recovers. What happens next will not only affect individuals, it will affect how the industry responds to silence, influence, and accountability going forward. And that is why this story matters beyond headlines. It is not about gossip. It is about systems. It is not about scandal. It is about control. And it is not finished yet. Quiet continued to receive opportunities. Those who speak out often disappear. According to industry insiders, this system does not need threats to function. Fear alone keeps it running. Fear of losing deals, fear of being labeled difficult, fear of becoming the next cautionary story. As the story unfolds, attention turns toward how public reactions differ from private ones. While fans express shock, many industry veterans react with recognition rather than surprise. They speak carefully, choosing words that acknowledge patterns without making direct claims. This cautious language reflects years of navigating an environment where saying too much can end careers. 50 Cent comments on this difference directly. He says that the public often sees the final image, not the process that created it. Behind every major figure is a network of lawyers, managers, and advisors whose job is to manage damage, shape narratives, and control exposure. When controversy arises, this system activates immediately, not to seek truth, but to limit fallout. The documentary does not claim that every rumor is true. Instead, it asks why certain rumors have existed for so long without being addressed. It questions why some stories are dismissed as gossip while others are taken seriously. According to the film, this inconsistency reveals how power influences credibility. Another key point centers on mentorship. 50 Cent speaks about how behavior is learned, not born. He argues that people become who they are through repeated exposure to certain environments. If exploitation, control, or manipulation are normalized early, they become tools later. This does not excuse harm, but it explains how cycles repeat. He emphasizes that accountability should not stop at individuals. Systems matter. When industries protect success more than people, harm becomes invisible until it can no longer be hidden. At that point, the damage has already spread across multiple lives and careers. As federal investigations and legal discussions enter the public conversation, confusion increases. Legal terms, asset seizures, and sealed evidence dominate headlines. 50 Cent explains that legal systems move differently than public opinion. Silence in court does not mean innocence or guilt, it means strategy. He expresses concern about how quickly narratives form without full information. At the same time, he acknowledges that investigations rarely appear without cause. In his experience, authorities do not invest time and resources unless they believe something serious exists beneath the surface. The documentary remains careful here. It does not predict outcomes. It does not declare verdicts. Instead, it focuses on the weight of scrutiny and what it reveals about power structures. When someone has spent decades controlling their image, even small cracks can feel massive. Attention then returns to the idea of influence versus choice. Were artists fully free to walk away, or were they navigating systems designed to limit options? This question hangs over the entire narrative. The documentary suggests that freedom in the industry is often an illusion, especially for those without leverage. 50 Cent makes it clear that he does not celebrate anyone's downfall. He states openly that he does not want families destroyed or children left without parents. However, he also believes that consequences are part of reality. When harm occurs, ignoring it only guarantees repetition. He reflects on artists from earlier eras whose stories ended quietly. Some faded away, some struggled publicly, some passed without recognition. According to him, many of these outcomes were not accidents. They were the result of systems that used people until they were no longer useful. The conversation grows heavier as the documentary addresses how fear shapes memory. People remember what they are allowed to remember. Stories survive only if someone has the power to tell them. When power shifts, buried stories surface, not because they are new, but because they are finally allowed space. This is where the role of media becomes critical. The documentary questions whether media acts as a watchdog or a partner in silence. For years, access journalism rewarded those who did not ask difficult questions. Now, as narratives shift, the same outlets scramble to reframe their coverage. 50 Cent criticizes this behavior openly. He believes media should not wait for permission to investigate. He argues that journalists have a responsibility to challenge power, not protect it. When they fail, they become part of the system they claim to report on. The documentary closes this section by returning to the central theme: accountability, not as punishment but as recognition. Recognition that actions matter. Recognition that silence has cost. Recognition that influence does not erase responsibility. It leaves viewers with unresolved tension. No final answers, no clean conclusions. Just a reminder that truth in hip-hop has always been layered, delayed, and contested. When it finally emerges, it does so unevenly, shaped by who speaks, who listens, and who benefits. The The story is not about one person. It is about an industry that allowed power to operate without limits for too long. Whether accountability truly follows remains uncertain, but the silence that once protected everything is no longer guaranteed. As the discussion moves deeper, the focus turns to how long these stories stayed hidden. The documentary suggests that nothing stays buried forever. It may stay quiet for years, even decades, but pressure builds over time. When that pressure finally breaks, the release is sudden and chaotic. That is what makes these moments feel shocking to the public, even though many inside the industry claim they saw it coming. 50 Cent talks about how power changes behavior. He explains that when someone reaches a level where rules no longer apply, they stop checking themselves. People around them also stop correcting them, not because they agree, but because their livelihoods depend on staying close. This creates an echo chamber where bad decisions are reinforced instead of challenged. He points out that success can protect people from consequences for a long time. Fame creates distance between actions and accountability. Lawyers handle problems, money smooths conflict, publicists shape stories. Over time, a person can begin to believe they are untouchable. That belief, according to him, is where the real danger begins. The documentary highlights how image management plays a major role. Public personas are carefully built to distract from uncomfortable questions. Charity work, awards, and public praise all help shape perception. None of these things prove innocence or guilt, but they influence how people react when accusations appear. When accusations finally surface, the response often focuses on damage control rather than reflection. Statements are released, silence is explained as legal advice, attention is redirected. The goal is not clarity, but survival. The documentary suggests this approach may work in the short term, but it weakens trust over time. Another major theme is fear. Fear keeps people quiet. Fear of lawsuits, fear of being blacklisted, fear of losing everything they worked for. According to several voices in the documentary, many people knew things that made them uncomfortable, but felt powerless to speak. This fear is not always obvious. Sometimes it shows up as jokes, deflection, or silence. Sometimes it looks like loyalty. Sometimes it looks like denial. Over time, fear becomes normal. It becomes part of the culture. 50 Cent explains that younger artists are especially vulnerable. They enter the industry with dreams, not protection. They trust mentors, managers, and powerful figures because they believe those people want to help them succeed. When boundaries are crossed, confusion replaces clarity. Is this normal? Is this expected? Is speaking up worth the risk? The documentary does not claim answers to these questions. Instead, it shows how often they go unasked. Silence fills the space where questions should be. That silence grows heavier with time. As legal cases and investigations become public, the conversation shifts again. Now, the same people who stayed quiet begin to distance themselves. Relationships are rewritten. Photos disappear. Praise turns into caution. According to the documentary, this sudden change reveals how fragile loyalty really is. 50 Cent comments on this directly. He says that real loyalty is rare in an industry built on profit. When power falls, protection disappears. People protect themselves first. That does not make them evil, but it does expose the truth about how the system works. The documentary also examines how fans play a role. Fans often defend artists passionately, sometimes without knowing full details. Emotional attachment makes it hard to separate art from accountability. The documentary does not criticize fans, but it challenges them to think critically. It asks whether admiration should cancel responsibility, whether success excuses harm, whether talent should outweigh truth. These questions are uncomfortable but necessary. As more voices speak, contradictions appear. Different stories, different timelines, different memories. This confusion is not framed as deception, but as the result of years of silence. When people finally speak after long periods, clarity is rarely clean. 50 Cent acknowledges this confusion. He says truth does not always arrive in a straight line. Sometimes it comes in fragments. Sometimes it comes through emotion rather than facts. The job of the public, he believes, is not to rush judgment, but to demand transparency. The documentary also highlights the cost.